Today's episode 30 of Stewarts Soundbites. And I can't believe we've made it to 30, but we have. We're here, still alive, still sane, kind of. And today we've got something a wee bit different. So I've got my colleague here, Lucie Clinch, who is a knowledge development lawyer. Lucie works with the injury team, and basically Lucie's role is to make sure that we are all kept in the loop. So Lucie's our fountain of knowledge, and she has all the relevant info on legal updates and other stuff like stuff we're going to talk about today. Lucie, you're kind of in the know about all this, and you keep us on our toes. So it's not surprising that you are clued in to this topic that we're talking about today, autonomous vehicles. Lucie and one of the partners in the firm, Julian, have actually done quite a bit of work on this, haven't you, Lucie?
Yeah.
We're talking a bit about autonomous vehicles, but I think more from the point of view of the kind of regulatory aspect and the law around it. We're not going to talk about the law today, even though we're lawyers, because, well, it's a bit dry, isn't it? So can be a bit dry, so we're not talking about the law today. We're going to talk a little bit about what autonomous vehicles might mean for the type of clients that we work with. So back to basics, Lucie, just tell us first of all what an autonomous vehicle is and whether there are different levels of automation, because in my mind I'm thinking, looks like a car, I've got my steering wheel and my gearbox, but I can just put my iPad on the dashboard and watch something while the car drives me somewhere. Is that right?
Yeah, that's kind of right. I'm also very happy we're not kind of dwelling on the legal intricacies of autonomous driving, but just for us all being on the roads, levels, yeah, there's 5 different ones basically. So there's levels 1 and 2, which we've kind of got already, cruise control, steering systems, lane change, that kind of thing. There's level 3, which is kind of a bit of a halfway house, and it's semi-autonomous, so you still need to have a driver in the car ready to intervene, but the car is capable of driving in certain scenarios on its own effectively. And then you could also have a driver in there who's not got hands on the wheel or could be watching an iPad, which is the dream. And then level 5 is what we call fully autonomous. So you don't even need a driver in there. You don't need a steering wheel. It can self-drive anywhere in any setting. So that's kind of like the top-notch autonomous vehicle. And in terms of look, they'd have kind of a stripped down interior because you wouldn't have the traditional sort of driver's seat and passenger seat. And hopefully they'd have a lot of more room in there for people to do what they want to do, whether that's have a sleep or read the paper or whatever.
That's scary though. It's scary, isn't it, Lucie? I mean, we'll come back to this kind of aspect of, being kind of terrifying in terms of trusting a vehicle in that regard. But thinking a little bit about the types of clients that we work with, so clients who've sustained really life-changing injuries, how do these types of vehicles have the potential to improve the lives of people that have been impacted by serious injury? And will there be adapted autonomous vehicles, and what would they look like?
Yeah, so I think kind of talking about the potential of these vehicles, I mean, the potential is, game changing really for the kinds of clients we're working with and anyone really with disability, and even the elderly, because what the grand aim that we've got with the UK government here is that we want to be able to ensure accessibility and mobility for people that might be isolated or unable to get out and do things easily. And we know for our clients, getting a bus to work, for example, can be really complicated and really stressful.
Yeah.
If you had a vehicle like this where you could summon it to your door and get it to take you to wherever you set it to take you, it could potentially open up like so much more of the world in terms of getting out there and getting involved in the community and just being able to get simple things that, you know, you probably take for granted in terms of just getting to work and back without the stress and strain of battling crowds and things like that. So ultimately, the potential in these vehicles, it's amazing. It could be life changing. But yeah, it is a long way off, and we'll probably come to talk about that. In terms of services and things, there's a kind of whole other area there, in that you could have food, medicine delivered to your house in these kinds of vehicles, without having to sort of go much further than your doorstep. And having access to those services is you know, also going to change a lot of things, because you just won't need the human driver to do that for you.
Wow, it's kind of exciting, but also frightening, isn't it, Lucie?
Yeah.
I mean, it's I suppose, just as whenever we spoke about this before, Lucie, one thing that I thought was really interesting was the ability to potentially, you know, have an app on your phone or something and summon the vehicle to your door. They're talking about that sort of accessibility, aren't they? Which would be life-changing.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one thing I know you and I have chatted about, that really you're going to have a mobile phone. You are going to have to be connected in terms of smart technology to get the most out of these vehicles, because all of those systems are going to be linked. And great, you've got a mobile phone, you've got an iPhone or whatever it may be, you can get to your door and summon your vehicle. And Tesla, I think at the moment, have already got the technology to make this happen. You can summon your car, so you haven't got to drive. For example, you can summon your car from down the street to pull up in front of your house for you to get into and get from, you know, literally door to door.
Yeah.
So that removes that stress of getting to your car in the first place. And again, that's just going to open up so many more opportunities for people to get out and about.
Yeah, of course, and of course not everybody lives in a house with a drive out the front, and kind of removes that, doesn't it? And we've talked a lot about the benefits of these types of vehicles being introduced to the UK eventually, but presumably there are also some significant risks and some downsides with these types of vehicles, you know, being on the roads.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole new thing, and we touched on before, trust is a really big issue. Public confidence in them, in autonomous vehicles generally, is quite low. You know, we are being asked to effectively take away human driving, human intervention, and fully rely on a machine to get us from A to B, and rely on technology. And we know from just working with computers day to day in work and things like that, it doesn't always go to plan. But we're talking about doing that in a car, where we're handing that responsibility over, and we won't have control over it as a passenger. So yeah, there's risk. You know, these vehicles, if they're going to share with conventional vehicles initially on the roads in the next few years, say, there are going to be accidents. You know, I think we're going to have to sort of play that trust game and almost embrace the fact that there might be a bit of a struggle initially, whilst that change is implemented. But the long-term goal still remains in sort of accessibility and mobility. And I think, you know, for our clients, there's a real question over design of these vehicles. You know, are they going to be fully accessible? Is it going to be easy for someone with a disability to get into these vehicles? And, you know, we talk about inclusive design in a lot of ways, but what really needs to be at the forefront of the sort of developers and manufacturers, etc., is that we're not always talking about getting, you know, Mr. Joe Bloggs able-bodied from A to B.
Yeah, of course.
These vehicles need to be fully accessible for everybody if we're really going to see the social benefits of them. And that's a real issue over the design that probably, you know, needs a bit of work from where we are today.
Yeah. And presumably if we have a fully autonomous vehicle that's adapted for a wheelchair user eventually, I know we're not close to that yet, but presumably it would just be pretty much an empty shell, Lucie. I mean, you'd just expect there to be a ramp to get into the vehicle and then maybe an sort of Alexa type function, I guess, to say, bring me to X. I mean, you wouldn't have the need for any of the bits and bobs that you have in a car normally.
Yeah, no, that's definitely it. And there's obviously the capacity there to make that space for somebody that needs to be getting in with a wheelchair, or even with a carer, somebody else, but they just need to be able to get in easily. And you know, there are vehicles around, they're electric at the moment, but there are kind of one person vehicles around at the moment where they kind of lower down to the curb automatically, and you can effectively wheel in the back. There's a clamping function in the vehicle, so the wheelchair would have to be clamped in before the vehicle can even start, and the doors all need to be locked. So these safety considerations in terms of disability are there. They're out there in the market now in sort of very small pockets of the industry, and it's kind of thinking about how we're going to make those provisions be real in these sort of super duper, all singing, all dancing autonomous vehicles that are going to take us into work and into our communities.
And where are we? Obviously we are not at the stage in the UK now that we've got the cars, the roads full of these types of cars. So where are we in the UK with using these types of vehicles? How soon can we expect them? And from a selfish point of view, I suppose I wanted to ask, you know, are they going to become mainstream, and are they going to be something that us as lawyers and, you know, rehab professionals and things need to bear in mind and make provision for in the context of litigation cases?
Yeah, definitely in the long term, we should be thinking that this is the future, you know, and we will be, you know, we might be bringing claims where we are asking for provision for an automated vehicle rather than a specifically adapted vehicle. Cost is always going to be a factor, and that's the thing with when these vehicles do arrive, which isn't in the short term, I might say. When they do arrive fully, we're talking about expensive vehicles that hopefully aren't just going to be available to the few, but are really going to be an option for the public. You know, over this year, we will be seeing a form of autonomous vehicle on the roads, which kind of have an automated lane keeping system. But this is effectively a kind of measure you can put your car into in slow moving traffic on a motorway only. And you can't go over 37 miles per hour, and that's a regulation. So that's the premise it's for. And these cars will be sharing with conventional vehicles on the motor, and that will be happening this year. But if we're talking about when can we actually look to be making provisions for these vehicles in our claims, say, we're not talking in the short term, and I wouldn't predict it would be much before sort of the next sort of 10-20 years, because we've got a lot of hurdles to get over in terms of infrastructure and things. We've also touched, when we've chatted, on data as well, and data sharing, and there's lots of discussions over people's rights to privacy and things, and if these vehicles are going to be tracked, kind of where they're going and where they're stopping and where they're involved in accidents and things, as society, we need to get on board with the fact that this data is going somewhere and it's being shared and it's being stored. We don't know how long for. So there's lots of talking points around embracing these vehicles, and you can kind of understand why trust at the moment in the public domain is a bit low. So lots of work for the government to do, but we're holding ourselves out as a world leader. So hopefully it will happen in the UK sooner than a lot of other countries. And
there've been some testing with different levels in America as well, which is interesting. But we're running out of time as always, but presumably for the type of clients that we work with, presumably the vehicles are likely to be suitable for quite a specific type of injured person. And I mean, I suppose it depends a lot on the individual as well, doesn't it? Because it does seem to be a kind of really terrifying test of trust.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. You know, we do have to trust them. We have to trust that when they're on the market, they're safe, and that they're safer than being driven around by a human. Essentially, that's the standard that we're seeking to achieve, really. And if we're talking about semi-autonomous mode, for example, for somebody with a serious brain injury or spinal cord injury, again, in terms of the designers really need to be thinking about, okay, well, if that person needs to intervene in the driving task, how are they going to go about that, and how accessible are the controls going to be in that vehicle?
Yeah.
Is the vehicle going to be started just by face recognition or voice recognition for those that don't, you know, have the ability or the mobility to press a button? So those are all considerations that really need to be sorted out before these vehicles come onto the market, because we wouldn't want to isolate anybody in these vehicles arriving. That is completely against the whole aim. So it's really about how we do make them as accessible and affordable as possible.
Yeah. It's such an interesting area, and I suppose the bottom line, Lucie, is that it's coming our way. The technology is coming our way, but not for a little while, and there's a lot to be thought about. We've had a really interesting question actually about from Scott, so thank you, Scott. It's about the statistics on accident and collision safety, and whether that shows, those statistics show that we're clearly moving in this kind of direction for transport. And because we've run out of time a little bit, if it's all right, Scott, we'll come back to you by email on that question, if that's okay. I'm trying to be better at wrapping up on time, but I will answer that, and if anyone else would like to hear the answer to that as well, please email me. I'll provide links to the articles that Lucie and Julian have written about in terms of the regulations and stuff, in case anyone's interested in seeing that as well. We'll make sure that that's available on the website. Any further questions, please do feel free to email me, and I'll speak with Lucie. We'll come back to you with as best an answer as we possibly can. But thank you ever so much for joining us today. As always, it's flown by. Thank you so much, Lucie, for all of that amazing information. And we will look forward to seeing you next week.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.